The people we're up against, don't forget, they were the defending their homeland. They were German paratroopers, the best they can get. The Panzer divisions, all the best they can get, right in there.
That we're to reach what's called the Kalkar Road, which is after the Reichwald. And at the Essex Scottish of our brigade was on our right flank. And during this night, I remember we were not receiving any reports. We couldn't contact them. It turned out that they were completely surrounded by the Panzer Lehr Division, which had come in on our right flank, because apparently the British hadn't moved forward when we did in this particular attack.
It was terrible there. It was quite fierce fighting, but it was so difficult, you know, with our vehicles. They're always getting bogged down.
They cleared the towns of Gosh, Kalkar, so forth and so on, all the way down the line.
During the Rhineland campaign, a second Canadian distinguished himself and won the Victoria Cross. Major Fred Tilston of the Essex Scottish Regiment was personally awarded his medal for bravery by the King himself. The Canadians were sustaining heavy casualties, and the fighting would get worse as they moved into the Hochwald Forest. Within the woods was the Kalkar Heights overlooking the Rhine. The Allies would have to control that strategic point before crossing the river, and the Germans were dug in, ready to defend to the last man. They held the advantage. They were on the high ground, shooting down on the attacking soldiers, and the dense forest provided protection from airstrikes. It would be a harrowing experience for the Canadian soldiers to clear the woods.
Hochwald, bitter. Yeah, that's the Hochwald Moylan wood. It's a ridge and there's forest.
We had to go and there was a rise. Oh, I guess it went up about 30 or 40 feet. And when our tanks came out through the trees, of course the squareheads are sitting up on top. And with their 88s, I mean, they were far superior to what our guys had. Like, they knocked them out. Bing, bing, bing. And I was leading the section, and we were told to, you know, go up there and take it out. Christ, and I get up there, and I turned around, and I said, where the hell is everybody? And I was the only one on top of the hill.
Then the last part of that operation on the West Bank for us was an attack to the Hochwald Forest in Xanten, and that finally cleaned the enemy out on that side.
Of course, in March we were involved with the Rhine crossing.
On March 23rd, the Allies crossed the Rhine River at various locations, with the Canadians crossing at Ries and Emmerich. The infantry made an amphibious landing, secured a beachhead, and bridges were quickly installed to allow the Allied forces to flood into the area.
After the Rhine was cleared out and the airborne had been dropped on the east bank of the Rhine, and the assault troops had got across, we moved over on bridges, Bailey bridges that had been put across.
I can remember going across this Bailey bridge that they put. In fact, it was just a bunch of pontoons laid across and a surface for us to travel across. And when you travel with a steel track carrier, it could slither off either side so easy. But it was quite shaky going across that thing. Thought we'd lose the carrier that day, but we didn't.
At the same time as the Rhine crossing, the Allied airborne troops participated in Operation Varsity. Their mission was to secure strategic inland positions to fend off any counterattacks against the river crossings. It would be the largest airborne mission in history. Included in the drop was the 1st Canadian Parachute Battalion.
This was 10 o'clock, broad daylight, bright sunny day, beautiful day. But the Germans knew we were coming, and they just shot the heck out of us. I could hear these bullets going by, and just wishing to get down fast. And I looked up, and my shoe was full of holes. But that was our main objective, to take out any Germans there, make sure that there's no reinforcements could go to the river, which was done, because we took the steam out of them. Watching, I think the total count would be about 17,000 airborne coming out of the skies within an hour. So it was a pretty hot bit of action. Then that's where a couple of the fellows won medals, as well as Topham, who won the only VC in the division. So it was a good day, a lot of action.
With the success of the Rhine crossing, the British and American troops pushed across Germany, while the Canadians were given the task of liberating the Netherlands.
The next significant thing I can recall, we go through Germany, we come back into Holland.
Well, there was several sharp affairs, but progressively we started to move faster and faster.
Our operation from then on was really clearing out enemy pockets up to Groningen.
We were actually chasing them, and they kept blowing the bridges, and then we'd have to, either go across by water or boat.
They would hold an intersection on your main road, and that was your own line of advance, because there were, you have to remember, much of Holland at that time did not have a lot of secondary roads.
The Dutch people would show us and tell us where the Germans were hiding out, and we would attack them there.
We bought the 1st and the 5th divisions up from Italy in the spring of '45 to bolster us. The job on Italy had been done anyway.
Came up by a Liberty ship and tank landing craft, landed at Marseille, loaded the tanks on by rail into Belgium, then we drove the tanks into Holland.
We figured at that time we could probably teach the others a little bit, having been in action longer. But of course it didn't work out that way, because it was altogether different.
They were desperate to try and find out. They thought we were still in Italy. Suddenly we attack across the IJssel River. They couldn't believe it, because the Canadian Army had already passed the IJssel River going north. So you can see what we're trying to do. The 5th Division comes north here, and we go west here. We're going to catch a lot of Germans in this pocket, and that's exactly what happened. They had no idea what was going on. As soon as we attacked here, they fell back, and they ran into the 5th Division coming north. They were trapped, and they knew it. They knew the war was over.
We were going practically straight west. The rest of the armies were going northeast, I guess, to get into Germany. But we were going to cut Holland in two.
And we were always flank support. Our tanks were carried the Irish regiment, the Perth. The Westminsters were a motorized regiment, so they had their own vehicles. But we also carried the Cape Breton Highlanders.
The Dutch in that area were on the point of starvation.
They were actually starving, and they crowded around the kitchens to pick up what the men left in their mess tins. Sometimes they deliberately leave half the food in their mess tin, just so they could dump it in the plates of the people.
We passed a concentration camp, and we were quite close to it, right close to the road as we're going past. And we saw all these figures clinging to the mesh wiring in the gates of this camp. It was pathetic. They were just skeletal figures.
One young lad came along, I guess he was, 9 or 10 years of age. And one of our guys gave him an old big hunk of meat to take home. Twice about an hour later, he's back with his father. His father wanted to know where he stole it. The guy said, no, he didn't steal it. We gave it to him. And the guy told us they've been eating bulbs for 6 months.
You didn't get a chance to get into all the celebrations because the people behind would get in all the celebrations.
You would see these orange banners, and then the orange banners mixed with their flags, and but you know, of course, they were ecstatic when we got in there.
You shared the tank rations with them, personal parcels, and there's no question that the Dutch people were so appreciative.
I remember one significant time, one house we're near, and out come these three people, pasty face and black rings under their eyes. They'd been hiding these Jewish people all during the war.
But also once of the collaborators getting all their hair so cut off, and the girls in particular. We felt sorry for them, but that wasn't our job. We weren't occupational. We were there to just make sure the war stopped.
And so at Groningen, we had a bit of a problem there with some fighting in the city.
To go in there, we went into one area, the Maisonneuves, I think it was the Maisonneuves of the Calgary Highlanders were going to go into one area, and they get, we were to follow through them. And they get stopped up, so we veered off to the left. To get through the city, I know we went across, and a couple of us went across in a rowboat.
The battle for Groningen was marked by fierce street fighting as a determined German army made a tough stand there. The city was divided by numerous canals and parks, making the advances very difficult for the Canadians.
Groningen was the only place I was at where I experienced being involved with the civilians after a battle and seeing their jubilation and relief, which was very moving.
We ended up near a place called Emsden, which is across a place called Def Seal. There was a little rut there. I remember that we were set up behind this house, and they started a fire. I ran like mad for this window, and I just got my foot in the window, and that's the last I remember. I saw orange flame. They eventually yanked me out. I was unconscious. They dropped me off at the RPA center, and they could find all kinds of little stones on my face and on my back, you know, the gravel, and my ear. They said everything was hollow, like, you know, talking in a barrel. I went back, but the hearing never come back.
As the Princess Patricias advanced into the town of Achterveld, they captured German troops preparing to blow up the local church. It was not for any strategic purpose, but just out of spite. The quick action by the Canadians in saving the church was never forgotten.
And this is the plaque that the Dutch erected not too long ago, 2000, to honor the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry who had saved their church by capturing the Germans and the explosives.
Somewhere along the line, a German commander come out, because we were on their tail all the way up, and asked for a truce. So our commander spoke to him, and he said, what you're going to find as you advance north of here, I'm not responsible for. Canadian commander said, you are responsible. You conquered these people. It was up to you to feed them. So anyway, the upshot of the whole thing was they called a 7-day truce.
So the proposition was, we'll stop at Arnhem, at Achterveld, we'll get the food into the people, and then we'll resume the war again. Crazy, of course, but that was the idea. They started to send in food by truck and by airlift, and in the period from the 30th of April, when the truce was signed, to the end of the war, the Allied Air Force they dropped 11 million rations, 11 million rations into occupied Holland. And each day, 1,600 tons of provisions by truck were sent through the lines.
And we were standing there, the bombers, these were the same planes, and the doors opened.
No, that was
very close by.
In Amsterdam, it was the same.
And the food came out.
Convoys were allowed to go through the German lines and bring in food to the cities.